Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to A Couple Facts, the podcast. I am Mark.
I'm Shay.
And this is the team. This is the gang. Today we're going to be talking about the education system and why it's failing. Of course, you probably already know that it is failing, and that's an issue. And we're here today to chop it up a little bit, here to present a few facts on the education system. You know, we already know that the school system is failing. Just read this study, or this number just blew my mind. It said 82% of all schools in America are failing. 82%. 80% of this country's public schools are not passing the test, educating our system, the test and educating our children. Yeah, that's a number that we got to deal with. And also, the United States has a 30% rate of students failing to graduate high school. So, you know, that just goes to show that we're not educating these kids. These kids ain't learning nothing. And
for sure, they're not learning anything.
Definitely not learning anything.
Well, in my experience, I don't have data to back up what I'm about to share, but in my experience in working in public education, I feel as though there's always going to be children who are performing, and that, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's very small and does not even come close to the number of kids who are there and just kind of hanging out. Like, there's always going to be, I guess you could say, like the quote unquote cream of the crop. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe if there are 500 kids in one class,
overachievers,
maybe 100 of them are probably excelling and doing the work, and then will go on to probably participate in higher education. And then the rest of them will kind of figure out whatever their life path is, or whatever the case is,
in the wind.
Or they might go on to start a business or to get a trade or whatever. They might not go to college, but I feel like there are definitely, like, if you were to go inside of any public education school, any public school, there are those like elite children, and then the rest of the kids who are just kind of there and just passing by. Some may not want to be there, but they're definitely, like, I would say for me, I definitely thought that going and achieving the highest honors was what I had to do in school. Like, I didn't know. I mean, it is an option technically.
I thought it was like necessary for you to score high grades and
for sure. For you, like A's and B's.
Yes.
Anything below a C. You know, like a C was really pushing it, but definitely if I had a C, it was one or two of them, not all C's or below. So I definitely thought the purpose of my being there, or what I was made to believe, is that my purpose in being there was to achieve at the highest level that I could.
Yes.
So anything below that, it didn't really see. I didn't know it was optional. Like some of my kids that I work with, they're like, and if you guys,
we're in education, by the way.
Obviously. So that's why we're speaking on this, not from a place of what our kids are learning or not learning, because we don't have kids, but rather him as an educator and me as a counselor. But anyway, I just thought that my being at school was to achieve at the highest level. But I do have kids on my caseload, and they wake up and they're like, oh, you know, they decide not to come to school, or they come to school, they're skipping class and all of that. And so that's just a foreign concept to me, because me going to school every day what I was taught was to listen to my teacher, to do my best, raise my hand and ask questions if I had any questions. I certainly wasn't skipping, not going to school, regularly. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't even an option for me. So it just goes to show, in my personal opinion, and there actually is data. Let me try to reach for it, because I do know some data just from my work that I've been doing. And I think if a child isn't attending like a daycare or any kind of center, public school or whatever, at a 90% or better rate, then by a certain age. So
if they're not
attending at least 90% or more of the time, and there's an age, and it's an early age, just like by 5 or 6, then that pretty much will let you know what the rest of their education would look like as far as their attendance. So
if they're missing school a lot, it's by the age of 5.
Yes.
They're likely to miss school their whole career.
Yes. So those kids whose parents, I'm assuming, caregivers, whomever, are like got them in daycare every day, or pre-K, those kind of early education.
Daycare.
You know what I'm talking about.
Daycare kind of sheesh.
Well, those types of placements. So, there's a lot of different ways that kids receive care, but I'm talking about those more structured settings, like even where I used to work, where it was kind of like a daycare, but it was really therapeutic, and it was for certain kids. And so we could tell based off of the numbers what their futures would be like for school. Like if their parents weren't waking up and putting them on this bus or dropping them off at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever time, 90%, that's like basically missing 1 day out the month or 2 days out the month. But if they weren't there,
not frequently,
pretty much every day, if they were missing 2 or 3 or more days out of the month, then that would let us know, and other people, this data is for other people too, what the attendance rate would be and if they would excel. Because you do have to go to school, not, you have to go to school. If there are 20 days in a month, let's say, just as an example, where you're supposed to be at school, you definitely got to be there more often than not. I don't know what that percentage is, but I'm pretty sure it's like 85+% of the time that you need to be there to take in this information if you want to excel at a higher level. And if you just want to float by,
And if you're not there, you can't get the grades.
You can't get your instruction.
So, saying that, the data that you just said, if they're missing school early on in their career, that's likely going to show you how it is in the rest of their school career. Is there any program where, like, anybody comes in and, like, hey, we noticed you're missing school already, so
social workers.
So we're going to try to help you get to school, and we're going to, put something in place where, just to make sure they get to school, so that at like 5 or 6 years old, so they don't continue that.
Taking out, bringing in somebody else to help with this, like removing all sources of support. That data that I just shared with you, that is indicative of basically the parents or guardians, what kind of, how important it is or not important for their kid to come to school. So basically, if the kid's there 90% or more of the time, then we know that education, learning, going to whatever program, school, or wherever center that they're supposed to go, or the kid is enrolled at, that lets us know how high on
their priority.
Yes, essentially, like in layman terms, that's what that data supports. So all that to say, I've worked in like 4 different states, and in a lot of states, obviously there are truancy issues. When a child is truant, they're not attending school regularly. If they're under a certain age, then their parents are typically held accountable for that. But once they reach a certain age, they're held accountable / they can also drop out at certain ages. Like in my district, you can drop out at 17. So I have some kids on my caseload who are just trying to bide their time until they turn 17 so that they can drop out, because that's what they want to do. But all of that to say that there are supposed to be in these different districts and such, like truancy officers and people who are keeping up with attendance and who are supposed to reach out to the parents and kind of talk to them and see what's happening, or refer that child to a social worker so they can go into the home or meet with the parents to see what's going on. I think some of the issue is that, like, I have a kid, just as an example. Well, I went to go get this student my first day, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for this student, because I go get them from class. And the teacher was like, oh, I haven't seen them since last year. And I'm like, what does last year mean?
That's what I'm saying, like, dude.
So here's what's happening with him. His situation is such that he and his family I don't even know, because I've seen him before because I went to his house, but outside of that, I don't really know what's going on. Like I can't, I've never had a conversation with him or whatever, but he kind of bounces kind of all around from district to district, school to school, due to his home life. And that doesn't really help in trying to kind of keep tabs on him, if you will. But still, even he hadn't bounced in the past, like for the past year, he was enrolled at the one school, where he was supposed to be. And in his situation, we kept trying to meet and chat and, with the parents and kind of talk about ways to get him at school because he can't drop out yet.
What the parents say?
Well, they either don't answer or they it's just a mess. So that's my confusion, because I'm like, okay, here's the thing. There are going to be kids who have no real interest in school. And normally by high school, let's say you've been failing and just getting passed by some kind of way with poor grades for 10 years. or whatever, it's a high probability that you probably don't want to be there and it's not really benefiting you. So at that point, teachers are just trying to chase you down and social workers trying to chase you down and your parents down.
They start to become a distraction because if they don't want to be there, they're messing with other people. They're not paying attention. They're causing. They're on their phones and skipping,
and doing all these things. Right. So there's a debate, not like actual real debate, but there's like, you know, debate in the education system about.
What's the debate? The
debate is, well, first of all, there's lots of debate. So some people say that there should be multiple schools. So like this school is for those elitist kids who take school seriously, who might go on to college because then the focus is on really getting them prepared for this higher education.
Serious students.
Of course.
Like I was.
Of course, that's probably not going to be the vast majority of the kids. And then if you pull out all those kids and you leave the second level of kids, which is going to be those who are doing okay.
Learners.
Yeah. Then, you know, teachers and staff and stuff might be able to manage them fine. But I'm saying like the issue is if you pull out all the elitists, then every classroom is going to be filled with kids who are performing at an intermediate level. And then, of course, which they kind of do have that with alternative schools and such, and you throw them over there and, you know, when they're there, they are, you know, alternative school. They're alternative schooling it up. And so there's debate about splitting them all up or just.
That's interesting.
Or there's debate about, maybe putting all the elitists in one school and then everybody else in kind of the same school. But again, those alternative schools will always exist for the kids whose behaviors typically land them in alternative schools. So those will probably always exist. So basically adding in another school. So
actually, I wouldn't be mad at that, with splitting the kids up with the ones with the good grades. Because it's almost like sending those kids to like a private school, but not really a private school.
Like a free school.
Like you said, it's not a whole lot of students that, you know, are excelling all like that. So if you take all of the kids in the county, all the cream of the crop students from all the schools in the county and put them in one place, I feel like that might work. And then the rest of the schools would just have the rest of the intermediate learners and then the alternative schools for the...
Or though is, so my data, do I have my data?
You ain't got no data.
I did have my data. Well, it says here that countries with the best educational systems per 2021 Best Countries Report, as you can imagine, what do you think was at the top?
China.
No.
Japan.
No.
It ain't the United States.
It is. And then the United Kingdom, followed by Germany, Canada, France. This is what they say.
I should have known Germany.
I looked at the biggest issue in education today. Obviously, there are a lot, but per the publicschoolreview.com, they say that deficits in government funding for schools. Funding is always an issue for schools and is, in fact, one of the biggest issues facing the American public education system today. For more than 90% of K through 12 schools, funding comes from state and local governments. I also saw data that shared that 90% of kids receive their education from public schools. So those, you know, what do you call it? Monastery schools, private schools, all of that, makes up like 10%. Most kids go and get their schooling from public schools.